The trial and execution of King Charles I in 1649 marked a pivotal moment in British history, fundamentally altering the nature of the monarchy and the relationship between the sovereign and Parliament. The sequence of events leading up to this dramatic conclusion was characterized by intense political and religious conflict, the erosion of monarchical authority, and the emergence of radical parliamentary power. The roots of the conflict between King Charles I and Parliament can be traced back to the early years of Charles's reign, which began in 1625. Charles's belief in the divine right of kings, his marriage to a Catholic princess, and his contentious financial policies set the stage for an escalating struggle. His tendency to rule without Parliament and to levy taxes without parliamentary consent alienated many of his subjects and legislators. One of the most contentious issues was Charles's imposition of ship money, a tax traditionally levied in coastal towns for naval defence, but extended inland by Charles to raise revenue without parliamentary approval. This decision was widely opposed and viewed as an abuse of royal prerogative. Moreover, Charles's attempt to enforce religious uniformity through the Anglican Church alienated Puritans and other religious dissenters, contributing to widespread unrest. The situation deteriorated further with the outbreak of the Bishops' Wars, conflicts between Charles and the Scots over attempts to impose Anglican practices on the Scottish Church. Financially strapped and militarily unsuccessful, Charles was forced to call the Long Parliament in 1640 to obtain funds. This Parliament, however, was determined to curb the king's powers and address grievances. The subsequent political deadlock led to the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642, pitting royalists, known as Cavaliers, against parliamentarians or Roundheads. The Civil War, which lasted until 1646, ended in a parliamentary victory. However, the conflict did not resolve the deep-seated issues between the monarchy and Parliament. Charles's refusal to negotiate sincerely, and his secret dealings with various factions, including the Scots and Irish, to regain power exacerbated tensions. By 1648, a second civil war had erupted, further eroding trust and leading to the eventual decision to put the king on trial. The trial of King Charles I was unprecedented, as it was the first time a reigning monarch was tried for treason by his own subjects. The decision to prosecute the king was driven by the radical faction within Parliament, primarily the Independents, who believed that Charles had to be held accountable for the bloodshed and instability he had caused. In January 1649, the Rump Parliament, purged of members sympathetic to the king by Colonel Thomas Pride in what became known as Pride's Purge, established a High Court of Justice to try Charles. The court consisted of 135 commissioners, though many refused to participate, viewing the trial as illegitimate. The charges against Charles included treason, tyranny, and murder, accusing him of waging war against his own people. The trial began on January 20th, 1649 in Westminster Hall. Charles, asserting the divine right of kings and the illegitimacy of the court, refused to enter a plea, stating that no court had jurisdiction over a monarch. Despite his defiance, the trial proceeded, with the prosecution arguing that Charles had violated the social contract between the king and his people, thereby forfeiting his right to rule. The defense, or lack thereof, due to Charles' refusal to participate, was marked by his consistent denial of the court's authority. On January 27th, the court found Charles guilty of high treason and sentenced him to death. The sentence was shocking not only due to its severity, but also because it symbolized a radical departure from the traditional understanding of the monarchy as ordained by God. The decision reflected a new political reality, where sovereignty was increasingly seen as deriving from the people rather than the monarch. The execution of King Charles I took place on January 30th, 1649, outside the banqueting house in Whitehall. The scaffold was surrounded by soldiers to prevent any attempt at rescue and to maintain order. Charles, dressed in 2 shirts to prevent the cold from causing him to shiver and appear afraid, delivered a dignified speech asserting his innocence and reiterating his belief in the divine right of kings. He expressed concern for the future of England and the welfare of his children, who would now be orphans. The executioner, masked to conceal his identity, beheaded Charles with a single blow. The execution shocked and polarized public opinion. For many, particularly royalists, it was a horrifying act of regicide that would bring divine retribution. For others, especially radical parliamentarians and Puritans, it was a necessary step to remove a tyrant and establish a government based on more democratic principles. The immediate aftermath of the execution saw the abolition of the monarchy and the House of Lords, with England declared a commonwealth under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell and the Rump Parliament. The establishment of the Commonwealth in 1649 marked a radical experiment in republicanism, with Cromwell eventually assuming the role of Lord Protector in 1653. The period of the Commonwealth and the Protectorate was characterized by significant political and social changes, including attempts to implement Puritan moral reforms and extend English influence overseas. Despite these efforts, the Commonwealth faced numerous challenges, including internal dissent, economic difficulties, and military conflicts. Cromwell's rule, though effective in some respects, became increasingly autocratic, leading to disillusionment among those who had hoped for a more inclusive and representative government. The death of Cromwell in 1658 and the subsequent political instability paved the way for the eventual restoration of the monarchy in 1660. Charles II, the son of Charles I, was invited to return from exile and restore the monarchy. The restoration marked the end of the republican experiment and the re-establishment of the traditional institutions of monarchy and parliament. However, the events of the 1640s and 1650s had fundamentally altered the political landscape. The execution of Charles I had long-term impacts on the monarchy and the English political system. It underscored the principle that the monarch could be held accountable by Parliament and the people, a notion that would influence the development of constitutional monarchy in Britain. The Restoration settlement established a clearer constitutional framework, with the monarchy's powers more explicitly defined and limited by law. The Glorious Revolution of 1688, which resulted in the ousting of James II and the ascension of William III and Mary II, further cemented the shift towards a constitutional monarchy. The Bill of Rights of 1689 established parliamentary sovereignty and set out key principles, such as the requirement for regular parliaments, free elections, and freedom of speech within Parliament. The trial and execution of Charles I also had a broader influence on political thought and revolutionary movements. The idea that a monarch could be tried and executed by his subjects resonated with future generations, inspiring republican and anti-monarchical sentiments in other countries. The French Revolution, in particular, drew parallels with the English experience, with the execution of Louis XVI echoing the fate of Charles I. The trial and execution of King Charles I were watershed moments in British history that highlighted the profound tensions between the monarchy and Parliament. The events leading up to the trial reflected deep-seated conflicts over authority, governance, and religion. The legal and political proceedings of the trial underscored a radical shift in the perception of monarchical power. The execution itself was a dramatic and polarizing event that elicited a range of reactions and had far-reaching consequences. The immediate establishment of the Commonwealth and the eventual restoration of the monarchy both highlighted the complexities and challenges of governing without a king. Ultimately, the execution of Charles I played a crucial role in shaping the evolution of the English monarchy and the constitutional principles that continue to underpin British democracy today.